My name is Jim, and I was diagnosed with myelofibrosis in 2014, and then the more serious one, the myelodysplastic syndrome, in 2018. I am a 77-year-old retired lawyer. I was a prosecuting attorney for 10 years, and then I was a corporate litigator for about 20 years. I retired about 20 years ago, and about 10 years ago, we moved about 30 miles west of downtown St. Louis, and we now have some land and 2 or 3 horses, depending on the day, 4 donkeys, 2 dozen chickens. More importantly, we live with our daughter and her 3 children, and so they help us. We help them, and it's I spend most of my time, well, I'm the pool boy and the stable boy and the groundskeeper and the handyman, but most importantly, I'm grandpa. For the myelofibrosis, there were no symptoms that I was experiencing. It was discovered accidentally, I think. I had kidney stones, and every year I would have a kidney stone x-ray, and one year, late 2013, the x-ray came back with, well, you got some kidney stones, but you also have a slightly enlarged spleen, which I didn't think was important. But luckily, my wife, who's a nurse, and our doctors thought it was, so they started doing some follow-up, some more blood work, and then it showed my white count was too high, and that suggested some problem. Finally, we did a bone marrow biopsy, and my family doctor had recommended we see an oncologist who my wife knew and I knew pretty well. And he was the one that ordered the bone marrow biopsy. And I still remember the day he came in and was all excited. "We've got a diagnosis," he says. And I thought, "Wonderful. What is it?" "Well, you have blood cancer." I thought, "Well, that's not good." And so he indicated that that was not his area of expertise, blood cancer. And so he recommended either St. Louis University or Washington University, and since that's where I'd gone to law school, I figured their medical school was probably good too. And so I chose Washington U and Barnes. Met a doctor there who is a leader in that area of cancer. And basically he told me about myelofibrosis and that you probably have 7 or 10 years as the average that you can go with that before you run into trouble. And maybe at that point it might morph into leukemia or something. I had no symptoms. I had no discomfort. I had no treatment. I just was aware of it, and we kept track of it by checking blood fairly often. In the spring of 2018, I began to get very short of breath, and the slightest exertion, it was more than. I was 70 years old at the time, and I thought, well, maybe I'm just old, but it was worse than that, and fatigue set in, and so we did some more studies, more bone marrow biopsies, and that's when we had the conversation with the doctor, and he came in and said, "Jim, this is serious. You have myelodysplastic syndrome." And he said, "Your situation, you might go 6 months, you might go a year, maybe a little longer if you're lucky. So unless we can find a donor and get a transplant." So we walked down the hall to the transplant doctor, and that process began. My transplant doctor, when I first met her, I thought, I didn't ask her, but she looked like she just graduated from junior high. But that happens a lot when you're when you're 70-something years old. But they asked if I would, before I met her, they came out and said, "Can we take your picture for the file?" I said, "Sure." And so then when I met her, an hour or so later, we talked, and she used the word cure, that stem cell transplant is a possible cure, and I've never used that word, but it was encouraging. And she also said, when I saw your picture, I knew that you were a good candidate for this. So that gave me comfort, that gave me hope. The fact that I was 70 meant that a special committee had to meet anyway to decide if this was, is this guy worth the effort? It's probably a more technical medical reason for that meeting. But otherwise, I was a healthy person. And so her kind of acknowledging that and saying, you're going to be okay for this, made me feel good. I don't remember panicking. I don't remember thinking, oh my God, this is terrible. But particularly the first time when I was concerned, but I guess because I didn't feel bad, I didn't have any symptoms that were a problem. I don't remember getting too distressed. Dr. O from Washington U said, 7 to 10 years. Well, I'm already 70 years old now. You tell a 70-year-old he's got 7 to 10 years, he's probably going to say, hey, that's not bad, And so that didn't really upset me too much. One thing it did do is that my wife and I began changing from discussing someday we ought to do something to let's schedule it for next year or let's schedule that for next month. And so we started to travel a lot and we did a variety of other things that just generally procrastinate for the first 70 years of your life. You say, someday I'll do that. And so we did it. Then when Dr. O came in and gave me the 3 months, that was a little more unsettling. The worst moment was being told you've got potentially just a few months to live. And I think just a combination of being basically an optimistic person, being a person of faith, that, this is in somebody else's hands, God's hands, and these doctors here are going to do the best they can. And I was very confident in the medical treatment that I was getting. I was confident in the support I had from my wife and my family. The other possibility is I'm just sort of oblivious to it. It's just like, well, what am I going to do? I mean, I can shout and throw things. That's not going to help. I don't ever remember getting really, really down. It's just, I've written a thing about, I did note, well, shortly before we went into the hospital, I said, I got to get to the beach again. And, living in St. Louis, there are no beaches nearby. And so we took a quick trip down to Destin, and it was still warm enough that you could walk along the beach. And that was relaxing, it was soothing, it was comforting. And it was the one time that I thought, this might be the last time I'm here. But, and I guess it's part of my faith. I thought, well, if I was going into prison for the next 20 years, I would be really upset about this being the last time I'm here. If I'm going to die 6 months from now, after that, I probably won't miss the beach. I think where I'll be, I hope, is a lot better than the beach anyway. So that's not an issue. For the myelofibrosis, there was virtually nothing that we did. There was no chemo, there was no radiation, it was just watch. And once the Myelodysplastic came in, then immediately we started a pretty serious regimen of chemo and blood transfusions. So I think starting like in June of that year, it was a week of chemo every day, and probably 1 or 2 transfusions during that week, and then a couple weeks off, and then we'd repeat it. I don't know how much chemo I had. I know I counted probably 15 or 16 blood transfusions during that time. I did not react poorly to the chemo. I really didn't. I don't remember being sick at all. Usually felt better after getting blood. In late September, I was told that they had found a donor, that it was a perfect match, 10 for 10 of the things that they look at. My sister and my kids were tested, and they came up with like 5 or 6 out of 10, and that was, if necessary, would probably work, but we found a 10 for 10. So I went to the hospital, and heavier chemo for about a week. And then just a couple of days, maybe one day before the scheduled transplant, I had total body radiation, which I referred to as being microwaved. And you sit on a table and clutch your knees, and 10 people with white coats and clipboards stand around and measure your head and measure your shoulders and your hips, and then they go away. And you stay in one position for like 10 minutes, I think, and then you turn around and they do it again. That was the only time I felt sick. After that, I was really weak at that point. I mean, I've killed all of my blood cells, and there's not. It's literally do or die at this point. It was scheduled for the evening of the 11th, which I was thinking, well, that's cool, because that's my oldest granddaughter's birthday is October 11th, and I'll get my new birthday on the same day. Well, it got delayed by 12 hours. We discovered later that the courier, my donor was found in Germany. Turns out it was a 24-year-old kid in Germany who I've since made contact with. But the courier missed the train in Munich. And so I envisioned this guy in a trench coat and a fedora and the steam coming out of the train, and passing the special gift from one person to the other. But he missed the train. So it was delayed for 12 hours or so, or 6 hours. I can't remember which, 12, I think. Anyway, it finally occurred a little after midnight on the next day, October the 12th. And the doctor came in. The doctors usually didn't come in for the blood transfusions or anything, and it was in a small bag, smaller than the typical blood bag, that I would get when I would get infusions. And I've already had a port put in, which is in your chest, and so it's easy to put things in and take things out. Hung it up, and I suspect the doctor was there just in case you had an immediate bad reaction for some reason, and I did not. And it's pretty anticlimactic. It's just you wait for the blood, the stem cells to drain out of that bag, and nothing terrible happens. And so then after a while, I went to sleep, and that was it. We wait for two things. One, is a bad thing going to happen? Are we going to have any graft-versus-host disease show up? And that does happen. And the second is, will they start producing new healthy blood? And I don't remember how long it was before we knew that. That takes a while, but they keep testing. I was in the hospital for a month, and my wife was there 24/7 with me, thank goodness. She's also a nurse, so that helped. And started taking, I don't remember when I started taking them, but clearly fairly soon I started taking antibiotics, and antifungals, antivirals. I claim they give me antisocials, but I don't know about that. And it worked. It worked. I mean, I just gained strength. I did not have any graft-versus-host disease except a rash that we treated, and it went away. Stayed in the hospital almost a month, and then I was, very weak, obviously, and came home and very slowly got strength back. Had physical therapy, occupational therapy came in a few times. And I stayed away from other people for a good bit because I have, very immature immune system. But eventually got my strength back. I'm still taking the various medications, and will continue, I'm sure, for the rest of my life. And that's not a problem. I have said that I didn't and don't wake up every morning saying, thank you, God, for another day. Although there's been a lot of those days. My wife wife says she does. But I've said it will hit me other times when I'm watching my grandson do something, or just being able to go to a baseball game, or again going back to the beach. I'm thinking, I almost missed this, and that makes me feel good. I don't know how I would feel if this had hit me at 29. I know I was one of the first times I was in one of the pods getting my chemo and feeling sorry for myself. There was a kid next to me who had just learned like a week before that he had leukemia. He was 20, 21. And I thought, how difficult that must be. I've had a good life already. So if something happens, that's unfortunate. I'll be sad. I trust other people will be sad. But 70 some, even back when I first got it, at 70 years is not terrible. I do think I have a renewed appreciation for life, and as I say, it comes in the weirdest times. But most every day, something comes to mind and say, "Oh, I almost missed this." I hit the jackpot with my caregiver. She's an RN and a retired hospital administrator, so she knew who to call if there was an issue, who to talk to, and was not shy about doing it. And there weren't that many issues. But and she also literally stayed in the hospital room with me 24/7, except for one Garth Brooks. Was it a Garth Brooks concert? I think she had to leave for. I was not pleased, but my sister substituted for her. And then at home, I mean, you're very weak, and you can't do much for yourself. You really can't. And if you've got a caregiver that's impatient, or gets tired easily herself, that can be a problem. But it requires dedication. It requires love, I think, or a lot of money. I guess you could maybe hire somebody, but it really makes a difference. I don't know how you could do it without someone, even if they can't stay 24/7. If they got to be there every day to listen to you complain, or go get you some ice or whatever. It's much more important than that, but it's really hard to describe how important it is. It would be great if there could be some treatment that would be as good as transplant, but didn't require transplant. White Caucasians apparently have a pretty good chance of finding a good match. If you're black, I think even if you're Spanish, mostly because there's just not that many donors apparently in those communities, and I don't know if that's a lack of education or a lack of our effort to spread the word of how important it is. But if there could be something other than transplants that would work, that would be great. And a lot of work still needs to be done on the graft-versus-host disease. Literally, one of the doctors that in the team that I was with has had like 2 or 3 transplants himself, and has terrible graft-versus-host disease. He has eye drops every 20 minutes or something, and gentleman down the hall from us had terrible mouth sores that made it almost impossible for him to eat anything or even drink anything. Now, I think those eventually cleared up, but it's still a difficult time to have to go through. Work needs to be done on graft-versus-host, and then just an alternative to transplants that come in a pill or an infusion would be great. Have faith. Have faith in yourself, have faith in your God, have faith in your team, your medical team. And if you don't have faith in the medical team, find another one. It's easy for me to say in St. Louis because we have a whole variety of excellent medical facilities around. But if you're in the middle of Montana, that may be a different story. But there's help out there. And finding organizations that are around that will help you find the help you need would be something that is worth looking into. And if you're not happy with your doctor, find another one. And that's not been my experience at all, luckily. But I know other people have been, they just, we're not connecting or something. Well, it's important to be able to connect and look for the help. Don't give up.